Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Calista Solon, and you're watching NLC Trans. Tonight I'm here with my dear friends and co-hosts, Tara Alexander and Stacy Dozier. And I want to apologize for last week. We sort of weren't here, but it wasn't entirely our fault. It was that awful New England weather. We sort of fell victim to that. So I'm not sure if anybody got on the air last week. It was just awful. But we got here tonight, and so we got a few things to talk about. Anyway, I know you had a few things. I had a couple things I wanted to talk about. Did you want to start, or you want me to start? I'll start. Anyway,
well, either way, it doesn't matter.
Didn't have we actually have some B-roll, which we may run later. And Renee could not be with us tonight. She's under the weather. She's been having kind of bad luck. But she had that cold that was going around. I think everybody had that. I don't think anybody was spared on this one.
Right. Well, the weather has been severe enough, I think, that it's...
Chocolate helps.
Yeah, it does. It keeps me going.
Hopefully Renee will be back with us next week, but she was not feeling well, so she couldn't be here. But I just wanted to quickly talk about a couple of things. Just quickly.
Somebody's banging on the wall in the other room.
Yeah. Anyway, hope that's not that's not an indication. But anyway, yesterday was an interesting day. A couple of reasons. Something I found out just a few minutes ago. But anyway, the Supreme Court apparently declined. They declined to hear the challenge of the District of Columbia's gay marriage law. Apparently, that had been challenged and went to the Supreme Court, and they basically said no. So that's actually good news.
Well, and right, that was D.C. allows same-sex marriage.
Yes, they allow.
And they wanted to put a measure on the ballot for the next election, making it illegal.
Right.
And they were told by the Election Commission, no, we can't do that because it would violate our own rules to not discriminate against voters. And that's what they challenged, and the Supreme Court said, get lost.
Get lost, yeah.
So any chance this creates a good precedent for wider spread marriage rights?
Probably not, because since the District of Columbia, well, since marriage is defined state by state, the District of Columbia going to the High Court is just because it's overseen by Congress, overseen by the federal government. Otherwise, it would have been a state Supreme Court.
Right. At some level, we have to realize that it's an issue of basic human rights, and that has to cross state lines.
In any event, it's a good thing. And every little bit sort of helps. Every little bit of headway we make helps. So. Well,
and it certainly does help, I think, in the sense of demonstrating public support for and public opinion about same-sex marriage to those that would otherwise decry it.
Yeah. So I'm happy about that. Anyway. The other thing I wanted to quickly talk about is just an event that's going on actually starting tomorrow, which is a little bit far afield, but I'm going to be there. This is an event called First Event, which is hosted by the Tiffany Club of New England, which is an organization sort of like ours, but they're up north a bit. And this is actually an event which is going on this weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and that's up in the Boston area. It's actually in Peabody, at the Boston Marriott Peabody. And basically it's an event that it's a multi-day event, and mostly it's a bunch of doctors it's a lot of doctors and various other people in this that sort of serve this community, authors and things. Yeah, there's a whole list. It's a very
and to point out, this is the 31st annual
transgender
conference that they're putting on. So this has been going on for 3 decades.
Yeah. And they're actually doing a whole bunch of stuff, fashion shows and dances, and a lot of little symposiums, which were going to be held by various people in the community. I have a whole list, but I'm not going to bore you with that. I'm just going to tell you that I'm actually going to be there. As it turns out, a whole bunch of my doctors are going to be there. But one of my doctors actually asked me to be part of his presentation. So, so I'm going to be up there on Friday, Friday afternoon for that. But it's interesting. A lot of doctors going to be there. A lot of doctors who I know and who I would sort of doctors I had actually looked at. Some of them, I think Dr. Osterhout is actually coming in from San Francisco.
Most of the major doctors in the transgender community
Yeah.
attend these conferences when they're held around the country.
Yeah, but
And the one here in New England is a very big one.
it is, and
It's called First Event because it's the first major transgender conference of the year every year.
yeah, it's very cool. So so anyway, and Dr. Spiegel, another one of my doctors, will be there. But that's actually Dr. Leonard who.
They're playing Pac-Man in the hallway.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I don't know if you all can hear the beeps that we hear, but
Probably not, but anyway, so Dr. Leonard has invited me to be part of his presentation, so I'm going to be up there on Friday. I've been going crazy trying to figure out how to get there because we're getting a snowstorm Friday morning, and I didn't want to drive up there in a snowstorm, and so I wanted to take the train, and I'm going through the train schedules and stuff, and it's
ran into the limitations of mass transit.
It's amazing. You'd think that Boston Mass Transit, the MTA or the MBTA, whatever, I guess they used to call it the MTA, now I guess it's the MBTA. But the Boston Mass Transit, which is pretty good mass transit, it's like you can't get there from here. I have to go up to the north side of Boston, up to Peabody, and it's like 14 trains to get there, and subways and buses and.
To get there for noon, you have the choice of either leaving at 4:30 or the night before.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane. The trip from New London, to Boston is easy, and if you could get to North Station, Boston directly, it would be no problem. But you can't. So you have to take a whole bunch of trains and buses and stuff to get there. Anyway, I think
It's a 2-hour drive by car, or it's between 4 and 8 hours by train and bus.
yeah.
And
It'd be 4 hours by Unimog.
The Unimog goes pretty fast. That thing will do 60 on the highway.
Oh my gosh.
It's not fun. And you need hearing protection.
And 45 over snowbanks.
Yes, but anyway, so I'm probably just going to go up to South Station and take a taxi to Peabody and just do it that way, because as much as I'd like to ride all the different subways to get there, it's like it's crazy. And my fear is that with the I'm boring you, I know, but my fear is that with the bad weather, if I miss a connection or something, I'll be out of luck. So.
Yeah, and some of those connections, then when we looked them up last night, it was 9 minutes to walk between stations, 10 minutes between buses.
Yeah, yeah. So it's
Oh,
Don't be late.
no.
Don't let the weather slow you down.
So I'm just going to go up to South Station and take a taxi. I think that looks like the only reasonable way to do it.
We learned last night what a lot of people already know, and that's mass transit is not convenient.
No.
It needs to be better.
Yeah, and certainly in this country, we haven't really. Well, we live by the car in this country.
Right.
Everybody has a car, and it's sort of a shame because mass transit is really a sort of a useful and wonderful thing. And I know, like up in Montreal, I love the metro. You can get anywhere in Montreal you want to go.
Within the city, when
Yeah.
you start getting into the outlying areas.
If you want to go to the outlying areas.
Yeah, you're going to run into
We're
the
never
same
going to
problems.
develop it to its potential while we have this car culture.
Yeah.
Well, some of us have.
And there's a lot of private property issues and such too. I mean,
Yeah.
the Acela is touted as this big high-speed train, and it goes between New London and Boston in about an hour or 10 minutes. The regular train takes about an hour or 25.
Yeah. Which is, yeah, it's sort
There's
of
a lot of
unfortunate.
limitations in the Northeast,
Right.
whether it be for the speeds that they can travel on the tracks.
Yeah.
Well, plus you have to stop at every station.
Yeah,
along the way.
the Northeast Regional does. It stops at a lot of stations, and the Acela
That's
doesn't.
basically the difference.
The Acela
They don't-
doesn't.
It doesn't travel any faster.
But
It's an
yeah,
express.
Okay.
it still saves you 15 minutes. It's just like, and costs twice as much, by the way. But it's cool.
Softer
but-
seats.
Yeah, it's cool, and if you could actually go really fast, it would be neat. But
But there's a lot of twisty tracks, and you've got things like like around the Connecticut coastline, you've got rail crossings,
Yeah.
bridges that are default open to boats.
Yeah.
And so when the trains come, they have to call ahead and close everything down. So you can't afford to pick up any speed because you have to be able to stop in case there's a boat going through and they can't close the bridge.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a big issue with the Acela, was all the swing bridges. There are a lot of bridges.
And if they
and
were
swing bridges.
default closed, I don't remember all the details, but there was a big conversation that they had about if the bridges were default closed, we could do a lot better, and then only open them when boats needed to get through. But our rules are apparently such that they're default open for boats, which probably go through more frequently than trains.
Yeah.
But
They run, well, they don't run,
it's interesting.
they don't run a huge number of trains, but they run about every hour, hour and a half or something, I think, through there.
I don't know.
So it's sort of, anyway, it's too bad. It's just a nightmare, so I'm going to probably wind up just going up and taking a taxi, which is sort of unfortunate. I really wanted to play on the subways. But anyway, so I am going to be up there Friday at First Event. But the event is going all weekend long, and they've got a whole bunch of doctors and stuff. I'd love to be able to hang around up there and check out all the stuff that's going on, but I have my grandson this weekend, so and he gets bored so easily. Except when it comes to World of Warcraft, and then he's fine.
Well, and we'll have to see if he wants to play DC Universe Online now, too.
Yeah, but anyway, so that's sort of what's going on with me this weekend. So you had some other news.
Well, it just came across in the New London Day before coming to the show here that Senator-elect Blumenthal was in New London yesterday.
Yeah, I know, and he was
Or
at our
Senator, they've been sworn in now. Senator Blumenthal.
He was at our favorite restaurant, and we didn't know.
Yeah, apparently he was at the new Copperwood Grill.
Which isn't. We haven't been there.
We haven't been there. And he had plans to go to Electric Boat's Gates, but the weather kept him from going. But he visited Mr. G's restaurant.
He went to Mr. G's, and
He
we
went to
weren't there.
Mr. G's.
We live at Mr. G's, and we weren't there.
Well, I almost went there yesterday
Yeah.
for dinner, but anyway,
You
we were
should've.
going tonight. So, the Muddy Waters Cafe and the Thames River Greenery and Caruso's Music.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
he made the rounds downtown, but
We could have tackled him and conned him into coming on the show. Oh well. Anyway, so that was amusing.
yeah, I won't read it all to you. It was interesting. He had the reporting. But
Yeah.
apparently, it's part of I guess what I will say is it's part of. I know they said it in here. He's going around the state. That's what it boils down to. An entourage of aides. Yeah, I'm not seeing it, but that's all right. He's going around the state to a bunch of places to meet and talk to people and actually, find out what they want him to work on.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Yeah. Well, that's not surprising. I really like Blumenthal, and he's a good guy, and I think he will do well. So happy. Anyway, that's kind of what's going on there. And Stace, you actually started your new job today, didn't you?
I started teaching today, which is awesome. The students are wonderful. Love the course material.
No spitballs or anything?
No, not so far.
They're a little older. Yeah. So that's cool.
Yeah, it really underscored that I'm doing the right thing, getting back to teaching, because
Yeah.
that's where I should be. I
Yeah.
really enjoy it. So.
That's really cool.
And,
Yeah. Big classes, or?
It not hugely big. There's 19 students in this one. More students than desks, so we have to.
More students than desks.
Well, it's tables. So
Tables,
some
yeah.
tables get one student, some tables get two. But they seem like really great bunch, bright kids. Very enjoyable. So yeah, I'm excited.
We'll talk to you again in May.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's a good thing. Anyway, so that's sort of what's going on in our lives.
Yeah. From 2 weeks ago, I had brought these in, and we didn't get to them. But
That happens a lot.
yeah. Oh well.
Well, our
These-
first week back was
Our first week back, so this is
Yeah.
our second show back.
Yeah. And actually, we were supposed to have two guests tonight, and they postponed, so they're going to be on
February 9th.
the 9th. That's right. So.
These were upcoming events, sort of in the vein of the first event that we talked about earlier. Connecticut's own True Colors.
Yes.
The True Colors organization is doing the annual True Colors Conference. This is True Colors 18. The theme is I Belong, in sort of the whole iPod, iMac vein, I belong.
I belong.
True Colors 18 is March 11th and 12th, and it'll be at Yukon Stores. And they're taking early registration now.
There.
Yes, as of actually a couple weeks ago. They started taking early registration, which I think saves you like $10 or something and gets you a lunch.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you register after the early registration deadline, you don't get the lunch. And you have to, it's not a big deal. They have a very well-stocked student center food court, but
But the lunch is fun. It's sort of like being in school again, lining up with the little trays.
well,
like
and
that.
it's pretty much, you go in the cafeteria and whatever you want that's in the cafe, all you can eat, and it's gratis, basically.
Yeah.
But
I'm sorry, go on.
for early registration. But the big point is March 11th and 12th, mark your calendars. Like everybody we talk to wants to try to make it to True Colors, so we want to try and make sure everybody has an opportunity to know it's March 11th and 12th. You can go to ourtruecolors.org to get more information and to register. And they do these things where, especially if you're kids or if you don't have a lot of money, that you can trade volunteer time at the event for day tickets kinds of things, and if you want to volunteer, the organization's always looking for people to volunteer for the conference or to volunteer for mentoring GLBT youth. The other thing is the other big conference that we have here in Connecticut is the 5th Annual Transgender Lives Conference. This is the intersection of health and law conference that gets held at the Yukon Health Center in Farmington. That will be April 30th. Obviously, whereas the True Colors Conference focuses a lot more on people and self-development, and I imagine there will be the spiritual conference that goes along, that's happening alongside True
Right.
Colors, which last year was free and open to the public. So I imagine they'll be doing, if they're doing it, they'll be doing the same. The Health and Law Conference focuses specifically on those issues. They have classes, symposiums put on by people related to health and legal issues and how it affects the transgender community. And that's a big conference on April 30th at the Yukon Health Center as well. I don't know if registration for that is open, but they're still taking, I believe, proposals for anybody that wants to do a seminar.
Yeah. Something we could do if we had time, which we don't. But it's just been really crazy of late. So, and in fact, we have a lot of stuff coming up this year. So it's crazy. And next month we're going to the opera. That's cool. So, yay! I like the opera. So,
And it's an Italian opera about a Scottish family.
yeah. Go figure. You know? Yes. We've talked about this before, but yes, Lucia di Lammermoor.
What was it? The Lammermoor and Ravenwoods?
Ravenwoods.
Yeah. Scottish Romeo and Juliet.
Anyway, so that's cool. I'm excited about that. But stuff going on, and so we actually have some B-roll tonight. I'm not sure. I can't see the clock, so I don't know if we have time for it or not.
Yeah, it's 26. 8:26.
But I don't know if you guys wanted to run that. If you want to, I can talk all night. but this.
Well, I don't think it would hurt if to run it, considering it's sort of a transgender 101 stuff. And
Yeah, so we've
been off the air for like 13
Yeah,
months.
we sort of wanted to come back, once we came back on the air, because I'm hopefully you all followed us on the other channel where we were not live. We unfortunately weren't able to do as many shows as we wanted on that because of various problems like the weather and various other things that were going on. But we kind of wanted to do the Transgender 101 thing when we got back. And
in case
sort
there's
of
anyone out there who
new
didn't
viewers,
follow our show,
yeah, new viewers,
unfamiliar with the subject matter
and
who
so
we are.
yeah, we sort of it's kind of a good piece, and it sort of describes the whole transgender world thing a bit, which is kind of neat.
Those funny words that confuse a lot of people.
Yeah. So if you guys want to run that, we can.
Yeah, sure.
And
Okay, fine.
then we'll run that for you, and then we'll come back and talk to you some more.
Joe gave me a look like we wouldn't get to it tonight.
Yeah. Well, I know yeah.
Our culture likes to make things simple, and gender isn't.
It was the constant fight of me saying there's nothing wrong with being this kind of girl as opposed to, well, I'm not a girl.
We really see transgender as an umbrella term.
I know lots of people, lots of men, who have vaginas.
It's not always easy to be in the middle.
I so prefer someone to just treat me like a human being.
Our culture has a pretty simplified model of gender, or traditional gender model. A model that says someone whose body has a penis would be identified as male. They would behave in a stereotypically masculine way. They would identify themselves as a man, and they would date a woman. That's what our normative or traditional gender model is. Someone whose body, whose sex is what we consider female, has a vagina, would behave in a stereotypically feminine way, would then identify themselves as a woman, and would date men. There are a huge number of individuals in this world who don't fit into those models.
I'm a trans man, female to male transsexual, but I identify primarily as a trans man.
I am a transgendered woman.
I identify as genderqueer because I feel like it's more accurate to how I feel in terms of my own gender identity.
People want to talk about transgender, and I always say you have to start by talking about gender. That's really the kind of sort of critical piece in the word. I use a somewhat simplified version: sex, gender role, and gender identity. And the other piece I like to touch on is sexual orientation, largely because of its relationship to gender and the fact that sometimes people confuse it with gender. Sex is about physical characteristics, organic components in our bodies, anatomic aspects of who we are, sex hormones like estrogen and testosterone, and the chromosomes. And it's often strongly related to genitalia. What is gender role? Well, it's essentially a social understanding of how we are in a gendered sense in the world. It can be something that we do ourselves. It can also be something that other people see in us. And typically when you have a boy, you give the boy trucks, action figures. A girl, you might give dolls, sewing kits. These are very gendered decisions. We gender color, we gender clothing. It's fine for a girl to behave as in a masculine way, what we might call a tomboy, until she reaches puberty. And then she's supposed to sort of femme up. fit in within the more powerful gender stereotypes of what a woman's supposed to behave.
Because I felt different a lot, I think I overcompensated by doing things that were kind of like hyper feminine. You know, like I had long hair, I wore dresses, makeup.
Gender identity is nothing more than how we see ourselves in a gendered way. You can't look inside your body for it, it's inside your head, it's between your ears. People translate that into one of our common cultural choices, which is either man or woman. But clearly, gender has to be unique, because we're all too complex for us to state our gender in such a simple term. The relationship between gender and sexual orientation is important to discuss here. A lot of people think that one is the other and vice versa. When people say gay, they often think they're talking about trans at the same time. And I'd like to make a distinction that all gay people are not transgender and all transgender people are not gay. Everybody has both a gender and a sexual orientation. That's the traditional gender model. That's what our media uses, that's what our advertising uses, our films use that. Our paperwork, when you go into an agency, people have to fill out paperwork. They ask you to check one box or the other. They don't give you any room for complexity. The traditional gender model doesn't actually fit large numbers of people. And we're really given two choices. We can either change the people or we can change the model.
When I was a really small child, I do basically remember feeling confused as far as my own gender was concerned.
There are times in my childhood that I did feel different in terms of my gender. Like, I never really thought there was something wrong with me or there's something different about my gender, because I don't think I ever really thought about it. I just knew that I wasn't as feminine as other girls, and I just felt kind of different.
The therapist asked me if I knew the difference between a boy and a girl, and I was just sort of like, and I think at the time, people were telling me that I was a boy, but I felt like a girl, so I didn't really think there was any difference. You know, I think I was 8 years old at the time.
For most people, the sex they were assigned at birth is a pretty good match with their gender identity. For transgender people, it becomes clear very often at a young age that their sense of themselves is different than what's reflected in the mirror, what's reflected when they look down at their bodies.
I would actually physically get ill all the time when I started to develop breasts, and I started to actually get to a place where my body was becoming more woman-like, and I didn't really understand it.
I wasn't comfortable in the assigned role of being a boy. I was born, and because I had a certain genital, you know, situation, I was. It was like that's a boy, and but I never felt that, and I don't think I was ever masculine in any way.
I was consistently challenged every single day about my gender. Somebody had to make some comment about it. Somebody had to say something about it. I was taunted by kids all the time.
And there was a lot of anxiety, I think, when I was growing up about how feminine I was. And my third grade teacher called my mother and said, "Your son is going to end up in New Orleans wearing a dress if we don't get him in therapy right now." So I think I grew up internalizing a lot of transphobia, that there was so much, and homophobia as well, there was so much anxiety about me being so feminine and trying to fix me.
There have always been people in different cultures and over time who would fit into the definition of people who live in a cross-gender way or who live outside the norms of just male or just female or just man and just woman.
I started having a lot of friends who were coming out as trans or as genderqueer, and I really didn't quite understand, and it just seemed really foreign to me. And as I started to learn, in an effort to try to understand what was going on with them, a lot of it rang true for me.
I actually met my first trans friend, and in the right moment, for whatever right reasons, he kind of just looked at me and said, "So how do you feel about your gender?" And I kind of broke down.
That's basically been my experience my entire life, that I don't really fit, that I'm an outcast, etc., etc. So that's the history. And so a lot of it for me, in terms of my process, is about trying trying to accept myself.
I felt really overwhelmed, not in a bad way, but definitely in a way that was 25 years in the making.
It was just really a relief to say, oh, like, I can identify as genderqueer.
An alternative to the traditional gender model would be a model that I would call the authentic gender model, one that actually represents everybody, all 6 billion people on our planet, using the same 4 components: sex, gender role, gender identity, and sexual orientation, but looking at each of those as being more complex than just one or the other, looking at them as a scale or a spectrum. We know that there are men that have breasts and there are women that have very small breasts or no breasts. We know that people's body hair differs, that people's chromosome structures differ, hormone levels differ, and we know that their genitalia differs. Our bodies are born differently, they also change over time. Some may choose to change their bodies, so that sex would have to be plotted differently for each individual.
Part of my own history as far as being a trans person is really understanding and really remembering every part of my transition and remembering what the struggle was that I went through in order to get to where I am today. I've had 2 surgeries and been on hormones for 5.5 years, and I have paid a lot of money and have had to work really hard, and I'm really broke.
Gender roles do change over time, and they change within cultures. In sort of Western American culture, the only emotion that we really give and allow men to have is either anger or sort of stoic pride. If men cry, we consider that feminine. But that's not the way in all cultures. In some cultures, men cry very openly and are expected to, and it's considered masculine behavior. So it's clear that it's not a genetic component of who a man is, and it's not a biological component, but crying or anger can be seen as social aspects of who we are.
Expressing my feminine spirit outwardly is crucial for me to be true to myself and for me to be happy.
The third component will be gender identity, something that's unique for each individual. So 6 billion people, 6 billion gender identities. Not even a spectrum or a scale, just individual points.
I never really felt like a lot of other people that I know in terms of being born in the wrong body. I feel pretty comfortable enough that I don't think that I'm going to physically transition. I don't know, things could change.
The final piece would be sexual orientation. Our traditional model likes to say that men date women and women date men. We know it's much more complex than that. We know that there are people that there are women that date women, there are men that date men, there are people that date both sexes or genders. Some people are attracted to transgender people, some people are celibate.
Because I date other masculine or people or men, I identify more with a gay male community or as a gay man than anything. I don't know. But I don't identify as a gay man.
So each of these aspects, where we're talking about sex, gender role, gender identity, or sexual orientation, is some sort of spectrum or scale, something vast and explosive as opposed to narrow and contracted.
One way to define transgender people is people who don't conform or identify with the expectations associated with the gender or sex they were assigned at birth.
You're constantly overly concerned about the rest of the world, because what does that mean? If I start to transition now, then I have to interact with the rest of the world. If I had just been dealing with myself, I think I would have come to terms with it sooner than I actually did. Now I'm very attached to my own identity being as a trans man.
People come from different places and different cultures and races and classes. So the terms that people use for themselves may really vary. People have really different terms and words that are used to identify themselves. Drag king, drag queen, bigendered, omnigendered, female to male, male to female, trans woman, transgender man, transsexual woman, femme queen, tranny, transgenderist. Another definition of transgender would be people who feel that the binary gender system of male and female doesn't leave enough room for their identities.
I don't identify as a man or a woman, and there have been times in my life when I have really conformed more to more traditional, like, femininity, but it never really felt that right for me.
A definition of genderqueer for a person might be someone who doesn't identify with the dichotomy of the norms of a man or a woman, who might feel somewhere in between. They might feel like somebody who identifies as a man and a woman, or neither a man or a woman, or something right in the middle. People assume that all of the transgender people out there are going through a medical gender transition. And we know that in the relative population of people out there who might be gender nonconforming, a relatively small number of people actually go through what would be considered a full medical transition.
They don't always understand that if I don't feel like a woman as I was supposed to because I was born a female and socialized as female, then that must mean that I'm transitioning to be a man. And that doesn't really fit for me.
If you are in a situation where you work in an agency or someplace where you have a lot of contact with individuals coming in and in numbers, you've got to have some way to be able to equalize it so that transgender people will have the ability to identify themselves and have the space to do that and have you interact with them in an appropriate way.
People are looking at me and they have to give me an ultrasound on my lower abdomen, and they're looking at my paperwork, and it's just, you know, of course, it says something about checking for things like cysts, ovarian cysts, and all of this other business. I mean, the technicians are just like dumbfounded. Like, they really didn't know what to do. They really didn't understand what it was that they were looking at.
It's not always easy to know how people refer to themselves.
For me, I think it's really important that just on a gender level that she is used, her.
We can take a look at someone and see based on the way they're dressed or how they look. That might be an incorrect guess. The other way to find out would be something that sounds simple, which is to ask. To ask someone, how do you identify yourself? How do you identify your gender? What pronoun do you like to use?
I always really appreciate it when people ask me what my gender identity or my pronoun preference is.
The problem with asking is that sometimes people feel like it should be obvious based on how they look.
I think my presentation is fairly clear. I think, even if it might not be fully successful, what I'm going for, I think, is clear.
So asking might offend somebody, but one of the ways around that is to actually ask everybody their gender. At the center, we have intake forms and screening forms, so that everybody who walks through the door, we ask them their sexual orientation, we ask them their age, we ask them their race or ethnicity, and we also ask them their gender identity. So that allows us to actually have people self-identify, so we don't have to guess by looking at somebody what their gender is.
Sometimes it does feel like I'm putting myself on the chopping block, for sure. But I'd rather people ask questions, even if they're not nice questions, than not try to understand.
For me, there's so many other aspects of who I am beyond me being transgendered, and I think part of what upsets me is when people can't get past that.
One of the important things is to not just reduce a transgender person to only having this identity.
I work at bars, I go promote for events and benefits, and I'm not a morning person.
I'm an artist. More than anything, I think I'm an artist.
I'm Chinese American, I'm a performance artist, I am a therapist, I'm a dog owner, you know, like all these different things.
It is so painful to live a lie. It really is, and it's so freeing to be true to yourself. And we should be applauded for that. We should not be persecuted for that. We should not be discriminated against and denied services, housing, jobs for that. We should be celebrated, and we should be valorized. And I think that's what I want to say to people.
Well, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that little piece. It was kind of a good one, I thought, and we'll probably show that again someday. We've actually showed that in the past, I think, once.
A couple times, yeah.
But anyway, that was good. We'll probably talk a bit about that in depth at some point. We sort of try to do that periodically, just to sort of disseminate a little information.
We sort of did, but that was running and no one heard it.
Yeah. And of course we were kind of laughing at you over there trying to very quietly open the thermos and pour coffee.
Failing.
I don't know if any of you could hear that, but
Creak, creak, creak.
yes, it squeaks. Sorry. But anyway, so I hope you enjoyed that. That was kind of a cool piece of film, I thought. And we actually have a phone call. And I think we have probably just about enough time to take that, so we're going to do that.
Just about 4 minutes.
Good evening, NLC Trans. You're on the air.
Hi. I was just sitting here, and my friend and I were we were wondering.
Okay.
I don't want to sound offensive with this question at all. And we were actually hoping that the video that you just showed would answer this question.
Sure.
Shoot.
But transgender folks, who do you look to date? Are you interested in straight men, gay men, women by chance? It's just really unclear.
Sure.
Sure. All of the above is the answer, I think. We're sort of a diverse group, just like the general populace. You know, we all sort of have different interests. And so we really don't differ from the general populace in that way. Some of us are straight, and you know, I'm bi, so I would date either men or women. But
men or women that see you as a woman.
Yes, I wouldn't. I certainly, and I have been with you know, earlier pre-transition. I had been with men who saw me as a man, and it didn't work for me.
Now, are there any gals such as yourself that are interested in other transgender ladies, as it were?
Yes.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
that's not an uncommon choice in the trans community.
Right. Yeah, that happens a lot.
And I think maybe sometimes because it's maybe easier to find acceptance in someone who has the same history.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Although it's surprising, you know, I was always surprised by the fact that because I thought going into transition that men wouldn't want anything to do with me, that they wouldn't be able to handle it. And to their credit, I can honestly say that's not true. Most of them that I went out with handled it very well.
Yeah, you went out with a number of men that post-transition that knew your history and had no problem with it.
Yeah.
One of the things that they did try to point out in that video, and it's something that we do try to talk about, is the notion that your gender identity and your gender expression and your sex and your sexual orientation are independent aspects of who you are. And
right.
So for a trans person, their sexual orientation can be anywhere along the spectrum. It still ends up being that it's not something that we can really generalize, because whether you're erotically attracted to men or women or trans women or people regardless of their gender or really macho men or really macho women or whatever it is that you're attracted to is really independent from the whole gender identity bit.
Guys in uniform.
Guys in, you've got special bathing suits to swim after the ships, I know.
I'm sorry.
But,
yeah, it is pretty much a diversity, very much like the general populace.
Yeah.
I think that we tend to be very open, but I don't know that there's really a big difference between us and everybody else in that respect.
No, among the people in the support group that we have, there is definitely a broad variety of identifications. We have trans women that are attracted to women, trans women that are attracted to men, trans men that are married to trans women.
Right.
Okay.
Trans man that's
Pretty
dating
much
a
any
gender
given set of
nonconforming.
possibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. It's understandable that your question is not a unique one. We've heard it from other people and understand that it's a point of confusion for a lot of people. But the short answer is, you take any 100 people and we'll probably follow in about the same percentages.
Yeah.
Right on. You gals have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks
You
for
too.
calling.
And thanks for the question. It was a wonderful question. And yeah, it is one of those things that does sort of confuse people, and
Right.
it's well, I think we in general confuse
Confuse
people.
people.
And the history of it, and we're fighting the history of it too. The sort of the diagnosis of our condition historically, and this is just 20 or 30 years ago, was that if you said you were trans and you were say a male to female transsexual, then you couldn't really get treated. You couldn't get surgeries if you said you were a lesbian.
Yeah, unless you fell into the heterosexual model.
and
Right.
could pass, the whole, which,
Yeah, things have changed.
Yeah.
right. But it was that way long enough, I think, that people, outside of the trans community, that's what they learned about.
Certainly, and it's always interesting to follow on to his question. It's always interesting to sort of turn it around and ask the question. We've got several people in our group that are trans women, so they used to be seen as male
Right.
and attracted to women, and therefore considered straight. And now that they've transitioned and they're living as female, because that's how they identify, they're still attracted to women. And so now they're considered gay.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's an interesting point that, in a way, that person, and you know who I'm talking about, that person's sexual orientation hasn't changed. They're attracted to the same people now that they were 10, 20 years ago. It's not any different. But the label we apply to them now is different.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of amusing. And if you happen to be bi, it's easy because you
happen to
don't
be
change.
bi, it's easy.
You're still bi. so yeah. But yeah, it's crazy. And I think sort of the whole language hasn't caught up to us yet.
Yeah, and I think that tends to be a lot of the confusion when you start putting these sort of almost restrictions.
Yeah.
But I mean, frankly, one of my best friend's husbands asked me the same question when I came out to them: is, so who can you date now? Gay guys? It's like, no, gay guys are looking for guys.
Yeah.
I wouldn't fit that bill.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, the whole thing is. It can be confusing.
Frankly, he was less tactful than you were. We appreciate your tact.
It was a great question, and thank you very much for that question. It's just one of those things that it does. It confuses people, and in fact, well, I'm not going to go into my love life too deeply. I could.
Who are you, and what have you done with Callie?
You've got about 15 seconds.
I'm sorry. Some night when we have nothing else to talk about, I don't know when that'll be, but
Some night we're not on air then.
we'll have to talk about my love life. I use that as a threat a lot. I'm sorry. Anyway, we are actually out of time.
We'll have to get the hand truck and roll them in volumes.
Oh, stop. I do not swim after troop ships.
No, you like to fly.
You have a pilot's license.
All right.
So,
Anyway,
we're about 20 seconds left.
We are out of time. Anyway, so please.
Thank you so much for
watching. Thank you for watching, and
Tune in next week.
Please join us next week, same time, same station, and we'll see you then. Thank you so much.